St Pat's, as we've been discussing already with Kenny and Johnny, this week they have unveiled what you could describe as the most ambitious stadium plan we've ever seen from a League of Ireland club this week. They're putting a proposal forward to Dublin City Council where they want to build a new 12,000-seater UEFA Category 3 stadium on top of a shopping centre. Interestingly, they're doing this without financial backing from the government or the FAI. So the big question is, how are St Pat's going to pay for this? Well, that is exactly the question that was put to the president of the club, Tom O'Mahony, by Off the Ball's Darren Cleary yesterday.
The City Council owns the site, but they want to do a partnership with a developer. So we are saying we can be that developer. Now, the nature of that deal would then have to be worked out. You know, it would probably be something along the lines that the City Council would give us the site, we would do the thing and give them back all the civic facilities, and then, you know, whatever value needed to change hands and that would all be part of the negotiating process.
So who would actually own the Richmond Arena should it be constructed?
It would be Garrett Kelleher and his company. Garrett
Kelleher would own it?
Yeah.
Who funds this to build it? Will it be Mr. Kelleher will be the one funding this?
For something like this, you put together a funding package of international investors, and that's the business that Garrett is in. That's what he does. And the beauty about this is that everything is already in place. Garrett knows exactly who would be the design and architectural team. He knows and has named the company who would be responsible for the actual development itself, the project management and so on. And he has his international investors lined up who will come in on this if we get the go-ahead, because it is the retail part of it actually makes it a very, very attractive package for investors. They know that they're going to get the return on their investment. But the retail part of it then in turn funds the stadium. That enables the stadium to happen.
So the answer to who funds it is Gareth and investors?
Investors.
To be determined.
Yeah.
How much will it cost?
That I can't say that for two reasons. First of all, we have no idea what housing specification Dublin City Council will set out, and obviously that has a huge implication for that helps to determine the cost of the thing.
Is there an over, is there an under, is there some...
No, we've no idea. But the second thing is, we may never tell people what this is going to cost, and part of the reason for that is we're not looking for any government grants for it. This is unlike practically any other stadium development that there has ever been in the country. This will be privately financed, so costs and everything like that become a matter between Garrett and the financial companies and so on that are going to invest in it. So there would be issues around commercial sensitivity and all of that. So if you know, it may well be the case that we won't put a price on it.
Can you understand maybe the concerns of fans if they don't know who's properly behind the project and they don't know how much the project will cost?
But they do know who's behind the project. It's
Garrett and unnamed investors. It probably doesn't give an idea of who's really behind it.
But who, for any investment that takes place anywhere, do people need to know the names of the banks that are investing money in it? Do people need to know the names of the investors? Absolutely not.
There's probably social capital in something like a football club in a different way.
Well, you know, we're talking about an international commercial transaction here. I would say the names of the investors would mean nothing to football fans. I think what I would say to people here is, look at what Garrett Kelleher has done in the 12 years that he has come into St Pat's. Through thick and thin, he has supported the club. He has made sure that the club survived the hard times that we had. He's put his money where his mouth is, and he is going to continue to do that.
Would you say the League of Ireland in general has had positive experiences with unnamed investors and single investors pumping money into clubs in general?
I'm never going to speak for any other clubs. I can only speak for St Patrick's Athletic, and our experience with our investor, who of course is not unnamed because we've named him about 10 times in this interview, is extremely positive.
Maybe just the general perception though is that it's probably right to have some degree of caution to a project like this, given that the League of Ireland has some history of these projects never coming to fruition and angel investors that appear and don't really fulfill the promises. You would probably imagine the certain degree of people being a little bit nervous from that sense.
Well, we're talking about somebody who has invested in this club 12 years ago and has continued to invest in the club when quite clearly he's not making, you know, a massive return out of it, quite the reverse.
Is this the opportunity to make a return? Is that part of his motivation?
His motivation, as far as I can see, and I mean, I'm putting my reputation on the line here. I wouldn't be involved in this project if I didn't have complete trust and confidence in Garrett. Garrett's motivation here is because he has been involved in this club for 12 years. He sees the opportunities for this club and for Inchicore in the development that he proposes, and this is what he does. He is a developer, and he sees the opportunity to bring his skills and his experience to the benefit of the club and the area, and he's going to do that.
So that's Tom O'Mahony, President of St Patrick's Athletic Football Club, in conversation with our very own OffTheBall.com's Darren Cleary at Richmond Park yesterday. Darren has joined us in studio this morning. Thanks for coming in.
Morning, Dave.
The first thing we should say is that there's an awful lot of road to go down before we get even remotely close to turning the sod, first off, for the building of this stadium. We'd no guarantee the club is going to get this land from Dublin City Council. No active bids for the land are in place, according to the council, at the moment at least. Of course, there's the possibility that DCC might see it better just to sell the land themselves to a private developer, and there's no connection to a football stadium at all. So Pat's talking about potentially having a game in this Richmond Arena by 2022. It does seem a little bit far-fetched in terms of the timescale. There's so much to get through.
Ambitious may be the kinder word than far-fetched. It's an incredible proposal. It looks very cool, and you have to see that the benefit of what they're trying to propose is it's not just regenerating their stadium and giving themselves a place to play football. I think they're looking at their proposal and they see it as one that benefits not just St Patrick's Athletic Football Club, but the general area of Inchicore. They're putting in civic amenities. They want to put in a library, they want to put in a theatre, maybe a pool hall, stuff like that. So they see this as a little bit more than just a football stadium project. They're looking from the outside and they feel their proposal is pretty all-encompassing of making that area, that Richmond Arena, the heart of the community. That is what they are going for. They want to make it a one-stop shop, not just for their football club to have somewhere to play football, but retail. They'll have housing there, they believe, and civic amenities too.
So they're trying to do this without any financial backing from the government or the FAI, which I guess leaves the President in a position where he doesn't necessarily have to tell us how much it's going to cost. But there have been issues in the past with League of Ireland clubs where there have been investors coming from outside of the game. It has not ended well. There has been a shady enough element to it. And the question as to who is actually going to be investing this money, I think is going to be one that's very relevant and something that the FAI, that the government, that maybe St Patrick's Athletic fans, League of Ireland fans in general are going to want to know the answers to.
Yeah, and in fairness, they have quoted commercial sensitivities as one of the reasons why they really kind of batted away those questions, and you can understand why, if there's going to be a massive tendering process by international companies to try and get a hold of the land, why they wouldn't be too keen to show too many of their cards. But I think with something like a football club, there's social capital involved. These people in the area, it will be part of where they live, where they fraternise, where they will raise their family and their children. So I'm sure they do have some interest in who is actually going to be behind this project and what benefit it has for not just their area but for this person. I mean, no one's coming in here as a charity to build these fantastic amenities for the good of their health.
Yeah, Garrett Kelleher is in the business of making money. He is a developer. There's no question that he has played an awful lot of finances into St Patrick's Athletic since he took over 5 years ago, and were it not for him, the club probably wouldn't exist today. But he's hoping that both this council land, the DCC land as it currently exists, and Richmond Park will be developed, all of it owned by the club and by extension Garrett Kelleher. So clearly there is money to be made here.
Absolutely. I mean, you got to imagine that a large part of the motivation is financial, and I don't think Tom tries to shy away from that in the interview. He mentions that is Garrett's business. He's in the business of developing land, and it won't just be this St Michael's estate. We touch on in the longer interview, which is on the Off the Ball YouTube, what happens to Richmond Park, and he says, well, we rezone that and that can be used for housing development too. There are other bids, we understand, at least if they haven't been tabled yet, they're in the process of being prepared. At least two others which focus on 420 housing units for that area where they plan to build a stadium, with at least one of them has a 50% ratio of affordable housing for that 420, and the other is just 420 straight housing units to be sold in whatever manner they need to be sold.
Yeah, so those who maybe aren't fans of football or the League of Ireland, their argument would be, we can't afford this sizable land mass within the Dublin inner city area to be given to a football stadium.
Well, the question is...
So that's obviously, there's a planning process that has to go through, and all of this will come out over the course of that process.
Well, what's more important to the area, I think you'd have to ask people in the area, but is it retail units, is it a library and a football stadium of 12,000 people, 12,000 seats, or is it affordable housing in the midst of a housing crisis? It's difficult to see. I mean, there is a lot of positivity because you have to admire their ambition and the fact that they are trying to invest money in infrastructures to safeguard the future of the club, because at the moment Richmond Park, the facilities are antiquated, they can't do a whole lot with them. If they are to move forward as a club, they'll probably need to look outside Richmond Park because they can't develop that area. This is a really good deal for St. Pat's. It would be a really good deal for Gareth Kelleher. Whether or not it's a good deal for Dublin City Council and the people of Inchicore, it probably remains to be seen.
The League of Ireland, Johnny, needs investment. It definitely needs ambition. It needs vision. And I don't think any of us are in a position to turn around and start, pointing fingers to St. Patrick's Athletic for what they've come up with this week, or immediately trying to pick holes in it, because they want a stadium where mothers and fathers will be happy to bring their boys and girls to play. I wouldn't worry, a lot of League of Ireland grounds, I wouldn't want to be bringing my young fellas to on a Friday evening in February or March.
It's a nail on the head though, isn't it?
And, it is a great idea, and maybe more clubs need to be looking at being as ambitious as possible.
Definitely. I mean, you need to think of 20 years down the line, not now. What will stadia look like? What will people who've come through a generation of being brought up by smartphones, how will they even think? You got to think that way, not like what's our need at the moment. But like I used to live in Inchicore, it badly needs something like this. And Darren's piece, and this is the whole thing, you need both sides of the story. Darren's piece touched on stuff that I wasn't necessarily aware of. What will happen to Richmond Park? I mean, that'll basically be owned by Kelleher, and it'll be developed presumably to make money. That's interesting. Now, from speaking to Pats fans, are overwhelmingly in favour of this. Overwhelmingly, and League of Ireland fans are overwhelmingly in favour. I think 12,000 is actually, it's a sensible figure, because in my view, the League of Ireland is a growth industry. I think it's going to become a lot bigger, because I think people will eventually get a little bit fed up with following English teams and will like following what is actually a good product and a product that's improving. And 12,000 people for me is not overly ambitious for a catchment area. Like, they've almost the entire southwest of Dublin there for a potential catchment area. Pats have lost a lot of their community identity, I think. I was speaking about this during the week. Inchicore has been in flux. It's had a lot of non-nationals coming in. A lot of people from the country have come in because it was affordable when other places in Dublin weren't. When I moved to Inchicore, I suppose 10, 12 years ago, left it since, but it's a strange part of Dublin at the moment. It needs regeneration. It basically, I think there's barely an ATM machine in Inchicore. You have to go into the Spar. So it lacks an awful lot of stuff. The Pats ground is completely antiquated, and the Pats ground functions for 2 hours in the week. That's it. Does nothing else. So this stadium has this idea of it's open every day. It's obviously available for a lot more than just when Pats are playing. The only thing about Kelleher is, Kelleher does seem to be a pretty noble developer, if such a thing exists. He seems to be, he's put a lot of money into Pats.
He's lost an awful lot of money.
He's
debts of 5 million. He's
burnt money, Darren.
He's been there 12 years. He could have pulled the plug long ago. He's been patient with the manager, Liam Buckley, even when they were struggling with relegation last year.
Absolutely.
He's always given them space, always given them time to work.
That should give every bit of confidence, you would imagine, though, Darren, in terms of going forward with this particular project. It seems to me there's a lot of trust. At some stage, people are going to have to put a bit of trust with Gareth Kelleher in terms of ambitions.
You see what's happening in Bray, right? So Bray's fans have basically abandoned the club because I do feel that they've no time whatsoever for the people who run the club, and they're deeply sceptical of their ambitions in terms of the Carlisle grounds. I don't get the sense that that's the case here, and that's the key thing. And the other thing is, if you want to move a ground, like, I've been to Coventry Stadium now, they're playing in Wasps ground in wherever it is. Coventry has basically, they're so regretful that they left the Highfield Road, and you can see this in so many clubs. Pats are literally moving across the road. They're not moving out to somewhere that's like 2 miles away that has no identity. That's a huge thing as well. And St. Michael's desperately needs regeneration.
And you talk about identity. That's exactly what it'll give that part of Dublin. You've more experience living there than I have. It actually really gives that part of Dublin a real kind of identity, almost something that you can be proud of. A football club of that stature in your area, you're almost drawn to that. You mentioned kind of social and the civic buildings there as well. Even a library mightn't seem a big thing, but I think it is. I think that kind of matters. Pool, wherever it is, a theatre,
like
things
a central
like that.
hub, isn't it?
Yeah, it is a hub. It actually is a hub.
It's
almost like looking at some landmark that's where we're going to because
that pulls people together.
It doesn't have that.
Yeah, pulls people together. People who would maybe socialise normal in a day-to-day kind of environment, suddenly they're down the library, they're in the pool, they're in the cafe, they're having you're meeting people, you know what I mean? And over a period of time, that kind of thing pulls people together. Like, I understand the housing point of view. Affordable housing for me is key. Not so much what housing is going to be available, but kind of affordable housing, realistically, what people can afford. Like, you know, so if there's obviously making allowances for that as well, I think at some point you're going to have to take a jump with this, you know what I mean, in terms of putting your trust in the people involved to go and put this thing together. But from a neutral point of view, looking at it, I say neutral, obviously I'm invested a little bit in the League of Ireland, obviously I'm from Dublin, but I'm really excited when I first heard this story and read about it over the last couple of days. It's given me a little bit of a buzz, and I've no real attachment to the football club per se.
Just one other point to make. Sport can completely transcend sport in terms of what a facility can do for an area. And like, I'm hugely regretful that Galway developed Pearse Stadium and let Tuam go to ruins. And Tuam is an utterly deprived town, typical of a deprived town in rural Ireland that needed something. Galway didn't need anything, and I think Galway GA made a colossal mistake there in basically developing. And Inchicore needs something like this. It really needs something. It's in danger of becoming a place that will just be almost like fall into nothingness. And it's also by the Lewis stop. It's a very good location for a ground. So there are an awful lot of positives as long as we can trust Kelleher's ambitions and that their good intentions are well-meaning.
I mean, you can want it to happen, but still have some questions about
sure,
the manner in which it happens.
Absolutely.
I think Gareth Kelleher has built up enough stock in the game and shown that he is very, very dedicated to St. Pat's. I think the important part of this is it is very, very positive on the outside of it. When you touch the surface of it, it's kind of scratching underneath the surface, and the kind of evasiveness of, well, we're not going to tell you how much we're bidding, we're not going to tell you what the general cost is, we're not going to tell you when it'll be done. We don't have to. We're not going to tell you who else is backing. Gareth Kelleher is obviously a man St. Pat's fans are familiar with and are comfortable with, but he's not doing this alone. He mentioned there'll be other investors, and that's kind of where the questions come in. They need League of Ireland clubs in particular. They need to strengthen the community ties, particularly when they have so many clubs.
Look what Bows are doing.
Look what Bows are doing. It's so important to not be a hindrance on your community. I remember when Shells announced they were leaving, they apologised to the people of Drumcondra for inconveniencing them for years. That's just the wrong attitude to have. Totally. You need to ingratiate yourself with your community, and you need to be seen as a vital part of it.
Yeah. And to have woven in there, woven into it. Yeah,
and to have more than just a football pitch there and 12,000 plastic seats, that would be very, very important to them.
Darren is going to be keeping abreast of this story as it goes on, and there's going to be an awful long way for this to run before we get to some kind of a conclusion. Will we have a brand spanking new 12,000-seater stadium in Inchicore in 5 or 6 years' time? The League of Ireland needs it. Dublin football probably needs it. We shall see. Darren, thanks a million. That was great stuff.
Cheers, Dave.